I'm making this video because I have unfortunately been watching quite a few ghost videos recently. And please excuse the sound effect my phone's gonna probably be making. But I'm not gonna try to debunk ghost videos because that's not something that I do. What I am going to do is try to explain why I don't believe in ghosts the way that normal people, and I use that term loosely, view it. So before I get too far into this, I feel like I need to explain why did I word it that way? What do I mean when I say ghost the way normal people view it? Well, most people, if you say the word ghost, their brain's gonna go to the standard concept of a white teardrop shaped figure with black facial features and arms sticking out. Or they're going to see something in their head that looks like a Pac-Man ghost with arms. That's what most people think of, because that's the standard illustration that you see kids have to see. But what is the concept of a ghost actually? A ghost is actually supposed to be the spirit of a deceased person that lingers behind for one reason or another. Typically, people will say that the spirit of said deceased person lingers because they can't move on. As an example, let's say that an elderly couple has lived in this house for 50 or more years, and then suddenly one of the members of this couple falls ill and dies. Now, there's a very good chance that this particular individual won't be completely at rest about the situation. So many people would say that this deceased person is still attached to the building. Or very possibly this person will be attached to their partner and can't move on. So that's the concept they're referring to. Now, by necessity, this means that any sighting will, in some way, shape, or form, resemble the person who has passed on, as the terminology is. I personally would prefer just using the word died because it's faster and it's a little bit more understandable. So if I refer to it, I'm probably going to keep saying the word died. So please do not think I'm being insensitive. I'm just doing it for clarity and ease of use. So most people, if someone knows the history of this particular situation and they visit the building or visit the person that this dead person supposedly has attached to, they're going to connect any ghostly, quote-unquote, apparitions that they see as looking like this deceased person. Or the other typical option that people will see, which this one doesn't make a whole lot of sense in a lot of situations, but sometimes it does. If, for example, you have a rocking chair that this person was in the habit of sitting in, that rocking chair might randomly start rocking back and forth. That according to the people who would be involved, would make sense because this person had a habit of sitting in that chair. It fits with their habits. But some things that people say a ghost doesn't make any sense. For example, there's a lot of paranormal activity, which is what they call it, in which random objects will fly off a shelf, a table, a counter. Pictures will fly off a wall. Doors will open and shut by themselves. You'll hear footsteps. You'll hear muffled voices. Things like that. Let's go back to the idea that this is an old person. Supposedly this is an old person who hasn't gotten over it. Let's say it that way. I don't remember what the term was I used. They are stuck. Under what circumstances would throwing something off a counter, a table, a shelf, or throwing something off of a wall fit with this person's typical behavioral patterns? I'm pretty sure they probably weren't the type of person that would throw stuff for no apparent reason. So whereas the concept of a ghost in that sort of scenario makes sense, the way that the ghost is behaving doesn't. Then you've also got the concept that there are malicious ghosts. That usually they are along the same line of thought. It's a person that hasn't moved on from a building or some sort of structure. And they're annoyed that other people have some sort of interest in it. For example, a person who has lived in this house for many years, he or she died, someone's moved in, and they dislike the fact that someone is now living in their house. So they're doing stuff to try to scare the person away. Okay, a little bit of a extraneous circumstance from my personal perspective, but I suppose that could potentially be the case. There's all sorts of videos you see of grumpy old men who want people to get off their lawn. And yes, I use that illustration to be funny. If it wasn't funny, my apologies. But here's the basic problem I have. Now, you have to keep in mind, I am a Christian. I believe in the KJV Bible. I trust it. I believe in it. The KJV Bible specifies that there are two destinations. There's heaven and there's hell. The Bible has made it clear in I believe it's one of the, I don't remember which gospel it is. I didn't think to check that before I started the video. There is one of the gospels in which Jesus is telling a parable, which is a true story, by the way. The rich man and Lazarus. And I almost called it the rich man and Lazarus. But it talks about how Lazarus was suffering constantly. Dogs came and licked his sores. The rich man fared sumptuously every day. Now, I don't know if they both died at the same time or if they died weeks apart from each other. I don't know how this concept works. But the Bible does specifically say the rich man died, and the very next words are, and in hell. So it's found in Luke chapter 16. And the verses in question are, verse 22 says, and it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Which, for those who are curious, Abraham's bosom was a temporary resting place for those who believed and would be in heaven. But Jesus hadn't died on the cross and basically opened up heaven yet. So Abraham's bosom was a temporary resting place for those who believed before the acts of the four Gospels took place. No, it is not purgatory. If it is desired, I can do a video explaining the concept of purgatory later. But for now, Abraham's bosom is basically like what you could theoretically call a heaven's version of purgatory. Obviously, I don't believe that's it, but to make it easy for some people to understand, I will refer to it as such. But anyway, carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, and the rich man also died and was buried. Verse 23 starts with the words, and in hell he lifted up his eyes. Now, the Bible is very goofy when it comes to timing across punctuation marks. If you notice, which obviously you might not because I'm looking at this, you might not see it the way I'm seeing it. The punctuation goes in verse 22 to verse 23 is as follows. And it came to pass, comma, that the beggar died, comma, and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, colon, which I'm not entirely sure why they use a colon there, but okay. The rich man also died, comma, and was buried, semicolon, which means that the sentence is still flowing. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, comma. Therefore, I don't believe there's any time between verse 22 ending and verse 23 starting, because the semicolon indicates that it's still a continual flowing sentence, though obviously the verses break the sentence in two. So, what I gather from this is that the rich man died, snap, in hell. And before somebody goes into the comments and says this, no, I'm not making the term snap because of Thanos and the Infinity Stones. I just thought of the word snap because it's one of the fastest sound effects you can do. Is relatively fast. But anywho, so the beggar died, comma, and was carried by the angels in Abraham's bosom. Fast, continual sequence of events. No time between the two. The rich man also died and was buried, and in hell. Continual passage of time there. So, why do I bring this up? Well, because all ghost encounters operate under the premise that the spirit gets stuck. Though the Bible very clearly indicates that the death and the appearance, if you want to call it that, and whatever their destination is, are two simultaneous instant occurrences. The beggar died, and the next instant he was carried by the angels in Abraham's bosom. I'm not going to say how long that particular process took. I would say it happened instantly. The rich man also died and was buried. Now the burying part, who knows how long that took people. But, and in hell, very next thing, there is no getting stuck. So why in the world did people come up with this idea that people's spirits get stuck on earth and we can see these things? Because they had to come up with some sort of explanation as to why these things are happening.